Hello and welcome, everyone. I'm Marissa Kozlov, and it is great to have you with us for today's eMarketer Tech Talk, where we host guests from all areas of media, ad tech, and MarTech. Today, we're talking about how AI can help power more targeted and engaging content, including webinars. We are going to hear all about that from my very special guest, Brooke Gracey, Director of Marketing at Cvent. Brooke, it is so nice to see you today.
Oh my gosh, I'm so excited to be here and talk all about AI. I love it.
I can't wait to hear all about it. I have to say, I got a sneak peek at your content last week, and I'm really excited for our audience to see that. And just to remind our audience, let's keep it conversational today. We'd love to hear from you. Just use the chat window on the on the right to respond to the great questions that Brooke has actually prepared for you as a part of her presentation today, and also to submit your own questions. Brooke and I will do our best to get to as many of your live questions as we can during the live Q&A in the second part of the show. So please keep those coming. We have great content planned for you today. Brooke, passing it to you.
Oh my gosh, thank you, Marissa. And hey, folks, welcome to this webinar. This is a behind the scenes where I'm going to tell you all about how we built a webinar using ChatGPT. We're going to discuss the whole process. I'm going to take you on this webinar build from start to finish, but throwing AI into the mix because AI is the big thing right now, isn't it? It has really got us all wondering, how can we boost our processes? How can we be quicker and sharper? But also, how do we use this tech properly? These are the big questions that I'm going to hopefully help answer today. But as we know, AI can be a little controversial as well. So I really do want to encourage this to be a discussion, maybe a friendly debate, so to speak. So as Marissa was saying, please use the chat. I'm so curious to hear all of your guys' thoughts as we walk through this process and about how you have used AI in your processes as well. Just to introduce myself again, my name is Brooke Gracey. I'm the Director of Marketing here at Cvent. I have always been interested in emerging technologies. Ever since I was a kid, I always want the latest and greatest and play around with it. And now with AI in the center of everything, I would call myself an AI enthusiast. My real focus, though, is finding a way to use this technology without losing our voice, how we can really have that balance between that really crucial human touch that we need in our marketing, while also leveraging AI to make us faster and stronger and better. So striking that balance between the organic and the authentic, I would say that's really my mission. So I'm super excited to talk to you about the potential of AI today. I personally have been geeking out on it, and I'm really excited to hear what you guys have found as well. And so, like I said, I'm going to actually take you through what I identified as 5 key stages when we built this webinar. And along the way, I'm going to discuss all the best practices that we found when using AI to help ideate, to build, to promote, to then execute, and then use those insights we got from the webinar post-event. And so with each stage, I'm also going to encourage you to debate the pros and cons of using AI technology. And we're going to start here right from the beginning. When I was gearing up to build a webinar, the first thing I had to do was come up with a webinar idea. It all began in this ideation phase. This is where the brainstorming happens and where that content development started to take place. I essentially think of it as like the birthplace of my webinar. But here's a thought-provoking question for you, and I think something we should all consider, which is, can AI truly comprehend and mirror human creativity? Or is all it's doing is really recycling pre-existing ideas? This is really interesting to think about, because when you think about what AI is actually doing, it's going and looking at existing content that already exists. So are we getting really new creative ideas when we're brainstorming? I don't know. Let me know what you think. I'm going to take you through the process that we went through when we were brainstorming for our webinar topic. I think of brainstorming almost like a game of darts, right? You never really know what idea is going to stick. You're just kind of throwing darts at the dartboard. You're hoping one of these webinar ideas is going to hit the bullseye and it's going to bring the masses. You're going to get tons of registrations and tons of engagement, but you don't know. It's really kind of it's a game, and you have to keep practicing at that. And the more webinars we do and the more we better understand our audience, the better ideas we're going to come up with, and we're going to get better with that over time. Now imagine doing that brainstorming process. You're all sitting in a room saying, what are we going to do this webinar on? Now imagine AI was in the room with you. I think of it as almost like now having a dart throwing machine. So you are now going to be not just tossing darts at the dartboard, hoping one's going to hit the bullseye, but you now have this machine that's going to help streamline your thoughts, and it's going to help you to hit that target faster. Not only that, it's going to be throwing ideas faster than you ever could as a human and giving you tons of ideas, hopefully really creative ones that you haven't even thought of. So how did we brainstorm with AI? Let me walk you through the process. Eventually, I'm going to do a little bit of a teaser here. The idea we ended up coming up with was innovative technology at events. This is how we came up with that idea, though. First, we had to figure out what it is we were brainstorming about to begin with. What were we trying to come out of this with? And that was an idea that was really going to generate with our audience. Our audience was event planners and event marketers. We wanted to really inspire them. Maybe they have a big event coming up soon. So we wanted to get them engaged and inspired and excited about using technology at their events. So we knew what we were, the general idea and who our audience was, but we also had to figure out what could AI help us with here. We needed to understand what AI could and could not do. And then we had to iterate really fast as well. So we were putting prompts into our AI tool, our ChatGPT, saying, give us some webinar topic ideas. Here's our audience, marketers, planners. Here's what we're trying to do. Give us 50 webinar ideas. And within seconds, 50 ideas pop right up there on our screen. Not all of them are great. Not all of them are what we expected it to be, which brings me to the next thing we had to do, which was to keep an open mind. We really had to be receptive to some of these kind of wacky ideas that came out of ChatGPT and think about maybe this is a really cool unconventional idea we should be thinking about. And we had to take that whole big list of ideas we got and refine as well. We couldn't use all 50 ideas, but we found 3 or 4 that really resonated with us, and we could keep digging in with prompts to ask ChatGPT to further define what that topic was. Now, for us too, it is not just a bunch of people, 3 or 4 of us sitting in a room coming up with a webinar idea and then poof, it's a webinar, right? We actually have an approval process that we have to go through. We need to then present this idea, innovative technology at events, this webinar, to our marketing stakeholders. And we used AI to help us with that process as well. We told AI who we were going to pitch this idea to. This is going to be our directors and VPs of marketing. What potential concerns do you think they may have with this idea? And ChatGPT gave us some idea. I don't know, maybe they'll be concerned about this or that. And we said, okay, if they are concerned with that, what should our response be? And we actually used AI to help us build our whole pitch. And we had responses to anything anybody could ask us. So I come to my next discussion question, and I hope we're all chatting here because this one's really important, which is this sort of overarching question, which is AI an asset or is it a bit of a liability? And I think there's both sides to this conversation. Of course, AI is an asset, right? When we think about the event ideation and that pre-planning, that efficiency we got with 50 webinar ideas coming out in a matter of seconds was a huge asset to us. It helped us do our jobs much faster. It was a very efficient tool. But on the flip side of this coin, it could also be a bit of a liability. And I say that because it lacked that human touch. While AI can analyze a ton of data, it does lack that human intuition, and it lacks the ability to understand complex emotions. So in those big list of webinar ideas we got, it could miss some of those little nuances that a human would incorporate if they were to sit down and write all those ideas just right out of their brain. I'm super curious to hear what you guys think, so please let me know in the chat. Asset or liability? And for our webinar last month, I actually did it with one of my colleagues, Carissa. We spent just a ton of time in ChatGPT to help us write the outline for our webinar along with the talk tracks, and even let it help us identify case studies that we could use as part of our presentation. And as I was interacting with ChatGPT, the same nagging question kept coming to my mind. And it was, is this the best and the most ethical way to produce content? Because honestly, it felt like magic. I would ask ChatGPT to write, hey, write me a talk track about using holograms at events. And seconds later, this whole talk track was written for me. But could I really show up to our webinar and read that word for word? Was that my intellectual property? I don't know. I'm kind of on the fence here. I'm super curious to hear what you guys think. Please chat me your thoughts. And as the chat hopefully lights up, I wanted to show you guys some ways that we used AI to help build the content for this webinar, as I was describing. We got the topic, right? We did our brainstorming and we chose innovative technologies at events. But now we needed to build out the whole outline and the talk tracks and everything like that. And in order to do that, we had to figure out some of those subtopics. So I would just ask ChatGPT, hey, what are some innovative technologies at events? And here comes my list, my subtopics: holograms, chatbots, interactive, fun tools to help with networking, so on and so forth. There's tons, right? So I would then have to go in and identify, okay, which of these subtopics is it that I want to use? And I'd start to pull those out and begin writing prompts to dig in more into those subtopics. So for example, tell me what are some ways that holograms are being used at events to help increase engagement, those kinds of things. And you can see how now this outline is starting to be formed. We used ChatGPT to help build it, but we did need to review and edit it on our own a little as well. We needed to make sure it was clear, it was concise, it was well organized. And after we had our whole outline together, we then used ChatGPT to help us build out those talk tracks, like I was mentioning. So you could say, write a 30-second talk track about the do's and don'ts of using holograms at events, or identify a case study when holograms were used at events. And these questions that I'm saying, I'm literally typing them into ChatGPT. This is what we consider a prompt. My prompt is, write a 30-second talk track about using holograms at events. And boom, there it is, my talk track. Sounds like magic, right? It was pretty awesome, but I had to dig in a little bit further and figure out why it was able to do this so quickly. AI is creating all of this content super, super quick, but there has to be a catch, right? And I'm going to get a little nerdy with you for a second, but essentially what AI is, it's AI algorithms. They actually create mathematical models. And these mathematical models mimic human intelligence. And I emphasize the word mimic because it isn't human intelligence. It's trying to act like it though. And it's doing this by processing data super, super quick. And when it's processing all of this data, what it's doing is it's trying to recognize patterns, and it's using those patterns to then make decisions. So what it's doing is it's looking at all of this content, all of this data, and it's just processing it really, 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 really fast. But this is why the ethics conversation tends to come up when we talk about AI, because it's using already created content to do all of this analyzing. And so the ethics surrounding AI content creation and ownership are very complex. It's multifaceted. This AI generated content, this talk track that I wrote in a matter of seconds, this raises concerns about the impact on traditional content creation industries. What about your creative writers? What about your journalists? Is there a potential of job loss there? And so I think it's really important. I don't have all the answers for you today, but I think it's really important for us to have this conversation, because I think as we use AI more and more to help do our jobs better, faster, and easier, this conversation is going to become more and more important. Okay, and so another discussion question that I want to bring to the group is the convenience of AI-generated content and those ethical concerns that we're talking about. It's super easy for us to understand that, yes, AI brings a ton of convenience to us. It brings scalability. That AI content could be generated on a massive scale. This could be really ideal for large companies, or if I'm doing a really complex email nurture that requires me to write 300 emails, AI can do that for me really quickly. It's very scalable. But again, the content, because it's coming from these mathematical models and already existing content out there, it could lack that personal touch. It could feel like it lacks a little bit of depth and ultimately that authenticity that you're going to get when you have human created content. There's this risk that it's going to maybe be a little bit too robotic or formulaic. And if you've used it, you may have seen this as well. So I'm really curious to hear your guys' thoughts and maybe how you've combated this. Now, for us, the next step in the process with this webinar, because we now have the topic, we have our outline, we have our talk track written, but now we have to get people to sign up, right? And we used AI to help with this webinar promotion as well. But as we were doing that, we really understood the importance of being able to engage all of our audiences and thinking about using AI to help really write promotion copy for these specific personas that we were inviting. And so the question came to our mind, is AI even going to be sophisticated enough to help us to target and engage diverse audiences? Or is it going to give us something that's a little too generalized and potentially even alienate audiences, do the opposite of what we're trying to do? And there really are valid arguments for and against this idea that AI is sophisticated enough to target and engage diverse audiences. Because on one hand, like we're just talking about, AI algorithms process a ton of data very quickly and very accurately. So it could allow us to be able to create personalized and culturally sensitive content that could resonate with a lot of diverse audiences. But here's a really important thing to consider. AI generated content could also lack creativity. It could lack authenticity and that emotional connection because it doesn't have that human touch. It could potentially alienate diverse audiences. And I'm going to talk about this a little bit here in a second too, but if the data you're using is not diverse, then the output you're going to get isn't either. And so we really need to keep that in mind. Okay, and this topic obviously is so important to us because we had to go promote an event like a webinar, and we used AI to help us build all the promotional assets. And we learned some valuable lessons along the way as well. First and foremost, many of the tools that we already have in our MarTech stack, many of the tools that we were using to help promote and produce this webinar already had AI built right in. We didn't have to go out and buy new AI tech to do this. For example, Cvent, right? We have a writing assistant built right into the product. So when we're writing our emails to invite or the thank you email when somebody does register, we can use AI from within the Cvent tool to help us do that. It can enhance descriptions. It could write speaker bios. It has a little drop down so you can change the tone, things like that. Another great example, I love Canva. Canva, tons of AI tools built right in, even for those that are using the free version. So don't go out and buy a bunch of new stuff. Look into what you already have and see, you might already have the tools available to you. And so writing the webinar title, the abstract, we even did a really fun teaser video. We did that all with AI. And it really came down to the prompts that we were using. Essentially what we had to do too is we had to train ChatGPT to understand our marketing personas, because ultimately we wanted it to write an invite email to a marketer and also an invite email to a planner. And we wanted it to be personalized for both of those audiences. In order to do that, though, we had to teach ChatGPT who those personas were. And so we did this by first grabbing our persona information we already have. We have detailed profiles of who the target audience is, their demographics, their pain points, things like that. And we'd used it to train the ChatGPT model. So we kind of told ChatGPT a little bit more about these personas. And then we asked it to write some content for that persona, write an invite email for a marketer, for example. And we would use that to continue to test and refine. We would say, write it a little bit different this way, or say it a little bit different that way. And so now ChatGPT is learning, and it's going to be able to write all of this content we need for our specific personas. It's really cool, really cool opportunity for us as marketers, even just outside of webinars. I kind of geek out on this because more and more it is a requirement for us to be personalized. We can't send the same invite email to everyone. So there is real opportunity to use AI to help us do that. And then our next discussion question here is about that personalization, which is AI an evolution of precision or regression in personalization? And this is where I want to talk about that kind of unintended bias too. And I think it's so important for us to understand that AI or ChatGPT isn't coming up with this stuff on its own. It's using data to help inform the responses it's giving you. So if the data that AI is using, that training data, if it's biased, then what it's going to spit out to you is also going to be biased. And so we need to make sure that when we're thinking about using AI in this sort of precise, personalized messaging, that we make sure that it is using the right data in order to do that. Okay. Now, the next stage of our webinar, this is the fun part. This is when we actually started talking about producing the webinar. So Carissa and we had used ChatGPT to do everything. And so we thought it was super important that ChatGPT also got to join us as a speaker on our webinar. It got us thinking, though, does turning AI into kind of a human or a character and allow for that kind of impersonation of human interaction, does that actually create engagement, or does it detract from the authenticity of the event? And let me kind of explain what I mean. So for us, we were going to go live, right? And we said, what is this going to look like? There were some key logistical questions we had to get out of the way first, which is fundamentally, how do you bring AI on as a speaker? Like, how do you even start to do something like that? I mean, on one hand, they're always available, right? Their calendar's not full. They're ready to go 24/7. They don't have any scheduling conflicts. But on the other hand, it doesn't seem super simple to bring a technology on as a speaker. But we were inspired. We were actually inspired by an event our colleague had gone to. It was a fintech conference, and they had a robot on the stage of a panel. This robot was one of the panelists. And we're like, yes, that is what we're talking about. It's so cool that we can bring this technology on in this way. But how were we going to do it for a webinar? Ultimately, we had to figure out what this AI character was going to look like. And Carissa and I felt pretty strongly that we wanted the character on the left. We wanted him to be like kind of fun and cuddly, maybe a little bit funny and sarcastic, just like we are. We wanted him to have this personality. But our webinar producer, Greg, said, no, guys, it obviously looks like the robot on the right, which I just thought was really interesting, how we all have different perceptions of what AI looks like when it's humanized. But don't worry, Chris and I convinced him, and we ended up going with Chatty, the chatbot robot here on the left. I won't go into all the logistics on how we made it happen, but he did join us as a third speaker. We recorded his voice and his responses ahead of time. I actually used my phone. I used a voice changer. And so I did a little robot voice like this for Chatty, the chatbot. Learn from my mistakes. No one wants to listen to a robot voice for 60 minutes. So if you were to do something similar, I would not recommend using the robot voice. But I love the idea of bringing this character on and kind of giving credit where credit is due. Okay. Our up next discussion question is about this humanization. And to what extent should we really be humanizing this technology? I always think of those like, Halloween kind of movies where you have the doll that's like actually an AI robot doll. She has super cool dance moves, but she's a little bit creepy and kind of scary. This is what I think about when I think about humanizing technology like this. There's the creep factor. There is a thin line between a human-like AI and one that's maybe too human. And when we do have something that looks too human, it could lead to a little discomfort. It could also lead to unrealistic expectations about what you could actually do. Can I ask this robot everything and it's going to know the answer? Maybe or maybe not. Curious to hear what you guys think about this kind of hot topic as well. All right. And in the last part of our webinar creation, now we've done the webinar and now we needed to look at all the data that we had gathered. We had our chat logs, we had our survey responses, we had data about who the people were that registered for our event. And we had to consider, was AI going to be able to help us do this piece of the puzzle? It was really a debate over whether AI's analytical precision outweighed its ability to understand nuanced human responses. And what I mean by this is let's take the survey as an example. When you're done with a webinar and you take a survey, there's usually that open text box that said, any other comments? Tell us what you think. And humans are responding. Now, if we put that data into AI, is it going to be able to really understand what those comments mean? Or is it going to possibly oversimplify, maybe even inaccurately analyze those human responses, which is then going to result in recommendations that may not be super helpful? So kind of a thought-provoking question to consider as I talk about how we did it. We use ChatGPT to look at chat logs, things like that. We did not go the full gamut of what we could have done, though. There is a ton of opportunity here. There are AI tools that could analyze the audio content, the video content, like, Brooke, you were talking too fast in this section, or you really lost the audience when you made that really dumb joke, Brooke, and we saw the engagement go down, right? There's really cool ways that we can use this tech to help us improve our webinars. Also, you have a ton of demographic behavior information. You can plug that in and have AI or ChatGPT analyze that data for you because that's kind of its wheelhouse, analyzing a ton of data super, super fast. And I'm coming to my last discussion question, and I mentioned that because Marissa and I are going to be saving some time here in just a few minutes to answer all of your burning questions as well. So as I'm going over this last piece, please submit your questions. We'll be getting to those in just a second. But before we do, I just want to hit again on the topic that is always on the top of my mind, which is AI capable of providing genuine human understanding? The question always comes up to like, would I do this again, right? And I feel very strongly about this, that there is a place for AI in everything that we're doing in marketing. There is a very big opportunity for us to use it to help us to scale, to help us to just find efficiencies everywhere. But we cannot underestimate the value of the human touch, the human element. I think there's a balance between human and tech, and we need to find that in order to get the true power out of this technology. And so with that, Marissa, do we have questions?
We do, Brooke. That was such a great presentation. I want to tell you that I realized at one point during your presentation, as I was watching you, I noticed myself leaning forward because I think I was honestly on the edge of my seat as to what you were going to tell us next within this process of building the webinar with using AI. So thank you so much. It was so engaging, so relatable. I think at a minimum, we've probably all used AI just to even see what it can do, putting in a prompt here or two. So you really brought so much of that to life today. So thank you for sharing how you used it in the process of creating this webinar, the pros and cons, where the technology was effective, where it was a liability, and really even how just AI operates, which I think most of us don't always consider. Shout out to our audience because you were all so fantastic in the chat, engaging with us, and those were some really great discussions, Brooke. So let's get right to the Q&A as you asked for. All right, Brooke, where is the sweet spot between AI and human intervention when it comes to content writing?
Oof. I mean, this is the tough one, right? Like, I think we're all learning. I like to say that none of us are experts when it comes to AI, which is the truth, right? We're all still learning where that sweet spot is. Here's what I know. I know the sweet spot is not, let's have AI write all our content and we copy and paste it into an email and we send it to our audience. It's not, let's copy and paste a blog post and post it right away. There is a range here. And on one end, you have the technology, and on one end, you have your human understanding and your human touch and thought. And the sweet spot is somewhere in the middle. I highly encourage you to review every piece of content that comes out of AI and give it your own special touch for a variety of reasons. One, it's not going to perform as well if you don't. And two, people can tell, search engines can tell. There's a lot of gotchas out there if it's just kind of a copy and paste. You really need to use it to help like get your inspiration going, but make sure you put your own little flair, if that makes sense.
That does make sense. Those are great points. Thank you. Brooke, there also seems to be a lot of debate on when to use AI. So how do I know when to use it and when not to?
I know, right? Like Brooke's telling me I can use it for everything, but like, what does that actually mean? Here's the thing. There's just so many use cases for it. And there's so many tools out there. And what I encourage everyone to do is just dip your toe in the AI waters. Go find a tool that you already own. If you have Canva, if you have Cvent, if you have Adobe is another great example, the whole Adobe suite. There are AI tools built right into these. Go and start playing. Once you start playing, you're going to start to understand how it could, for you or for your team or for your marketing organization, really start to provide impact. And the other thing I can't say enough, and we do this at Cvent, and I always get really excited about this, is the sharing too. We're not experts, right? None of us are. And so as your teams are dipping their toe into the AI waters, encourage them to do so, but share their learnings back, whether it's a prompt library or we have a spinny wheel at our team meetings that if your name comes up on the spinny wheel, you're going to tell us how you've used AI this month to help do your job better. Sharing that information is super important in this stage where all of us are learning.
Okay, thank you for that. Our next viewer has some questions about some of the data points that you may have had available to you beforehand before using AI to craft everything related to the webinar. Did you have any psychodemographic data available about the audience, or did you have an audience avatar defined and fed to the AI ahead of the webinar?
I'm not sure if this question is about actually including AI as a speaker or if it's just the audience generation in general. But one of the things that we kind of talked about here, but I think is really important, is that it did understand our audience because we taught it to understand our audience. And so using all those persona information that I was talking about, we said, here are the people who we want to come to our event. And then it would write content like that. As far as like analyzing who actually showed up, we can do that with ChatGPT, but the character we used who joined us as like a third speaker was all pre-programmed ahead of time. So there wasn't any actual like live responses it was giving. So it didn't really need to understand who the audience was because we had done it ahead of time.
All right. Thank you for that.
Yeah.
Our next viewer says that they have an AI influencer on Instagram with 2.7 million followers. What's your take on that concept?
Yeah. Let's do it. Let's learn from each other. I don't know. I love just like perusing through all of the AI stuff. I follow a couple influencers who have nothing to do with AI, but I've started seeing AI content pop up in their feeds, some really like funny videos and things like that. As with anything, like you kind of have to sift through the trash, right? And figure out what is and isn't, but like it's constant inspiration with this technology. And so I love the idea of let's have more AI influencers so we can all figure out what we could do with this like cool tech.
That's awesome. Well, maybe in the chat, someone can share their favorites in terms of their favorite AI influencers.
Maybe we have a future AI influencer right here on the webinar.
Hope so. All right, Brooke, we are going to take one more question today, which I think our audience is probably all pondering. Would you use AI in the same way for a future webinar? Why or why not?
Oh, it's the hot question, right? I mean, for us, for Carissa and I, when we did this webinar, we set out to do it as AI centric as we could. So we used AI to do everything. It wrote our whole script, right? I definitely see the pros and cons of this. I would not do a webinar the exact same way I did, but I would do another webinar leveraging AI. It's that sweet spot conversation. I would use AI to help create a ton of efficiencies. I mean, I estimate I could probably save 15, maybe even 20% of my time just using AI to do a webinar. But I would include a lot more human intervention so that it didn't sound maybe as robotic and formulaic as it may have.
All right. Well, Brooke, I mean, it seems like you learned a ton just by building all the content for today and all the tests that you ran. So thank you so much for being here. This was a lot of fun. You had such great content, and thank you so much for answering all of the questions from our audience. It was so nice to have you here with us.
Thank you.
So I'm just going to take a moment today before we close to share a little bit more about what's going on across eMarketer's media channels. You can register for more live analyst and tech talk webinars on our events page at eMarketer.com/events. On the audio side of the house, don't forget to tune into our daily podcast called Behind the Numbers. You can find that anywhere you listen to podcasts. And finally, please check out our newsletters. Keep an eye on your email. You'll be getting a link to today's recording. And thank you all for your time. Thanks again to Brooke, the team at Cvent, and our studio II crew, our production team behind the scenes, for making this webinar possible. We'll see you all on the next Tech Talk.